Greetings from the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. When I set out to write a lecture for this virtual expo, I decided to concentrate on an insight of great significance that resulted from my experiencing events that most people would understand as having some paranormal or startling characteristics. These types of occurrences are important to consider in relation to conditions of life that have always seemed mysterious or enigmatic. A new acquaintance recently asked me about my interest in metaphysics and spirituality. She hadn't read my book, Testament, and didn't know about any of the things that have happened to me. I told Anita that I'd always been interested in the unexplained ever since some unusual events during my childhood. She wanted to know about these, so I described hearing a disembodied voice calling my name when I was around 5 years old. I mentioned to her that in my research I discovered that this was a phenomenon that had occurred to a great many people at different times in their lives, including Sigmund Freud. I also mentioned the time when I was a teenager and attempted to hold a seance. After I said I called upon the spirits of the dead, there was suddenly a small tornado outside the apartment, and this was very unusual for Pasadena, California. As we spoke further, I stated that my experiences and research have shown me that all living things are continuously interacting with an intermediary superconsciousness or spiritual force. Anita then told me that she had a friend who tried to contact spirits using a Ouija board, and the messages had so startled him that he vowed never to attempt this again. This led her to inquire if I thought this type of situation was disturbing to the spirits of the dead. I said, it isn't as if each manifesting entity is being pulled away from someplace against their will. I compared the situation to the Force in the original Star Wars movie manifesting to Luke Skywalker with the voice of Ben Kenobi, and I added that popular entertainment was another means of expression of this all-encompassing creative force. I added that although I majored in cinema, I myself no longer attended movies, and she said that she could well understand such a choice. What I have realized, and what I think my book, Testament, documents in some rather direct and obvious ways, is that this superconsciousness with whom we live every moment of our lives may be recognized through circumstances often described as coincidences and synchronicity, intuition and telepathy, prophetic dreams and visions, mediumship and trance-channeling, healing, as well as events sometimes associated with such expressions as hauntings, talking poltergeists, and electronic voice phenomena. This predicament might be articulated as all living things having a shared subconscious mind or thought conductor. Such expressions as oneness and Christ consciousness are also useful. In my research, I also found such terms as oversoul and universal mind. My nonfiction book, Testament, was published 10 years ago. I used a question-and-answer interview transcript format to provide a documentary-style case study to share experiences that otherwise would have been extremely difficult to communicate. The word paranormal is one often assigned to some of the occurrences that I observed, including the materialization of small objects and hearing utterances from non-physical beings in a tiny town in rural Oklahoma. But that was just the beginning. A free internet edition of Testament is available at testament.org, presenting these interview transcripts, journal entries, and photographs. In 1995, I traveled to Oklahoma to interview the family experiencing phenomena associated with what has been described as a talking poltergeist. After having been researching similar cases for a screenplay and later an unpublished book centering on the 19th century so-called Bell Witch haunting in Tennessee, I estimated this was a rare opportunity to investigate a contemporary case. As surprising as it still seems to me, my visit resulted with all my expectations being exceeded to an astonishing degree. As I mentioned in the prologue of my upcoming nonfiction book that I've given the unusual title, Hollyweird, although I didn't know it then, working as a publicity writer at Paramount Pictures, while in my spare time, researching and writing about the paranormal would provide me with a unique perspective upon finding myself experiencing a bizarre sequence of events beyond anything I'd seen on the screen. The book is an autobiographical account that also features commentary on occurrences in the lives of the world's paranormal people. During my years as a Hollywood publicist, when I contributed to movie publicity campaigns, I didn't consider how movies and TV shows can provide diverting entertainment that may keep a person at a level of consciousness not far beyond that of living life as a spectator without any personal involvement toward helping to make the world a better place. After reading in Fortean Times magazine an article about America's Talking Poltergeist, an article that may be read at the Testament.org website, I contacted the family and spoke to Maxine, the mother, via telephone. It was surprising to learn that before her divorce, her last name had been Bell, so children and grandchildren in her immediate family retained the Bell surname. We arranged for me to visit and interview the family in August, just after my 39th birthday. 3 days of interviews and amazing experiences brought me a new understanding that there are no limits to what occurrences are possible in our lives. One of the bizarre events involved a large beetle flinging itself against my hotel door one night at bedtime for a considerable interval. On another night, I telephoned my twin brother in Los Angeles, and as I spoke to him, he became startled and told me that his bed had suddenly begun shaking. The interaction with the haunting presence motivated the Oklahoma family to attribute much of the phenomena to a spirit they called Michael. After my interview trip was over, I returned home to Southern California and was astonished when variations to unexplained phenomena associated with poltergeists in earlier eras continued to occur in my presence. Just like in Oklahoma, coins were materializing among a startling variety of unexpected and uncanny happenings. Recalling some baffling events earlier in my life, it seemed Michael had also been my unseen companion all along. Considering a superconsciousness influencing each individual's thoughts and experiences allowed for many mysterious things labeled supernatural to become feasible. It seemed justifiable to compare the concept of God, Christ consciousness, and individual consciousness with the psychology terms superego, id, and ego. Eastern spiritual traditions express facets of existence understandable in context with this oneness, using words such as karma and reincarnation. We need only consider our own thought process to find evidence of this angelic force of Christ consciousness. In my own life, I found symbols and metaphors equated with the spiritual journey, including the Paramount Mountain logo and my having experienced 2 inexplicable burning bushes while living across from the Angelus Temple in the Echo Park district of Los Angeles. The expression, "let your conscience be your guide," is one intimation that we each are always being helped by our cosmic mind, and through each of us, this superconsciousness works to help others. The Talking Poltergeist cases and other famous paranormal accounts chronicle ways the cosmic mind has manifested with intermediary emissaries. I'll mention a few renowned cases. Madame Blavatsky, or HPB as she preferred to be known, is often remembered as author of The Secret Doctrine, which today the Theosophical Society describes as a book that outlines a vast scheme of evolution relating to the universe and to humanity, and to the unseen as well as the seen worlds of manifestation in which life is said to exist in thousands of forms. In HPB's case, the intermediary emissaries were known as the Mahatmas, or Masters of Wisdom. Often in reading about history's paranormal people, one finds that repeatedly witnessing strange phenomena manifesting in their presence may inspire them to hypothesize that they are somehow endowed with some exceptional psychic power or mental capacity, as did HPB. In comparison, due to the chronology and variety of my own experiences of similar events, I always knew such circumstances around me had nothing to do with any conscious goals or inexplicable power or ability of my own. Personally, I have attempted to be completely candid in reporting my spiritual evolution, and there are records of the lives of other paranormal people where it would seem erudite, plain-spoken testimonials have been preserved concerning events that altered estimations about what could happen in the customary day-to-day reality. One memoir of HPB was left by a companion in her later life, Countess Constance Wachtmeister. In her book, Reminiscences of H.P. Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine, the Countess observed, and I quote, "Frequent mention has been made here of HPB's master, and I think that it will be interesting to some of my readers to hear how she first became acquainted with her teacher. During her childhood, she had often seen near her an astral form that always seemed to appear in any moment of danger and save her just at the critical point. HPB had learned to look upon this astral form as a guardian angel and felt that she was under his care and guidance." End quote. Another case that I consider in wholly weird is the Elizabethan age's Dr. John Dee. It seems a bit miraculous that so many of the spiritual diaries that he recorded have survived to the present. His autobiographical writings of his paranormal experiences suggest what life was like in Europe more than 4 centuries ago for one who reported interaction with spiritual creatures and good angels. He described the visions of his scryers, as mediums were called at that time, as they told him what they saw and heard while gazing into a crystal globe. There were also occasions when Dee chronicled other forms of supernatural interaction. Where visions in a crystal ball are concerned, consider this predicament as a Renaissance equivalent of the movies for the scryer, with spiritual creatures, angels, and other distinctly human emissaries seen in different settings along with assorted objects, letters, and numbers visible in reflective surfaces, usually with symbolic or metaphorical significance. The scenes also show attributes reminiscent of dreams. The visions are described as featuring diverse attire, animals, furniture, transformations, swords, fire, trumpets, jewelry, beams of light, celestial sights, plants, smoke, gold, water, you name it. He even referred to his encounters with spirits as actions, reminiscent of that famous Hollywood expression, lights, camera, action. As I acquainted myself with these transcripts of his conferences with spirits, I was again reminded how mysteries of human individuality, inspiration, and achievement find ultimate solutions in the perception of God as organizing superconsciousness, and our brains as receivers and transmitters for diverse sources of thought. Our individual personality becomes the result of feelings and decisions arising from those thoughts that one chooses to act upon. In this light, the spiritual evolution of human civilization can be understood as involving individuals honestly sharing their experiences or innovative insights into some particular avenue of human experience and knowledge. While researching Dee, I discovered that one Dee biographer, Benjamin Woolley, wrote about Queen Elizabeth being an enthusiastic practitioner of the royal touch. Quote, "According to this rite, which had origins reaching back at least to the reign of Henry II, a monarch would touch the neck of a sufferer of epilepsy or scrofula, a painful and disfiguring inflammation of the lymph glands, who would thereby be cured." End quote. The royal touch phenomenon was researched by French historical author Marc Bloch for a book published in 1924. The royal touch was translated by J.E. Anderson for an English language edition published in 1961. Bloch's introduction reminds what often happens to data that seems mysterious to historians. Bloch wrote, quote, "These facts, or at least a general outline of them, are well known to all who have studied or who are interested in such matters. Yet it must be admitted that they are peculiarly repugnant to the modern mind, since they are usually passed over in silence. Historians have written massive tomes on the idea of royalty without ever mentioning them," end quote. In the 20th century, Edgar Cayce became a famous mystic, known as the sleeping prophet, by entering into a trance state and becoming a channel for a seemingly limitless succession of spirits demonstrating their union with an all-knowing intermediary organizing superconsciousness. They would speak in plurality, usually ending sessions with a comment such as, "We are through for the present." The phenomena manifesting are comparable to talking poltergeist cases, yet, instead of disembodied voices, the entities communicated through Cayce. One of the interesting books about him that I've read is Edgar Cayce on ESP by Doris Agee, who reported, quote, "It has been estimated that during his lifetime, Edgar Cayce spoke in some 24 different languages while giving readings, although he had conscious knowledge only of English," end quote. Cayce never completed an autobiography during his lifetime, but A. Robert Smith compiled the 1997 book My Life as a Seer, The Lost Memoirs, from an unfinished 1932 memoir by Cayce and other occasional writings. The book includes remembrances of childhood anecdotes that seem especially noteworthy. Around the age of 9, Cayce would see his late grandpa and play with children in the barn, although there were no children residing in the area. An account was related of his first vision in 1890, quote, "Kneeling by the bed that night, I prayed again that God would show me that he loved me. He would give me the ability to do something for my fellow man, which would show to them his love, even as the actions of his little creatures in the woods showed me their trust in one who loved them. I was not yet asleep when the vision first began, but I felt as if I were being lifted up. A glorious light, as of the rising morning sun, seemed to fill the whole room, and a figure appeared at the foot of my bed. I was sure it was my mother, and I called to her, but she didn't answer. For the moment I was frightened, climbed out of bed, and went to my mother's room. No, she hadn't called. Almost immediately after I returned to my couch, the figure came again. Then it seemed all gloriously bright, an angel, or what, I knew not, but gently, patiently, it said, 'Thy prayers are heard. You will have your wish. Remain faithful. Be true to yourself. Help the sick, the afflicted,'" end quote. In one of the numerous channeled reading transcripts, one of the people present asked what was the voice that spoke, and the response is quoted, "That of the superconsciousness of the body," end quote. In another channeled reading transcript, the responding entity refers to, quote, "I, Michael, the Lord of the Way," end quote. This identification is confirmed when a question is given about the relationship between Michael, the Lord of the Way, and Christ the Way. The response includes the statement, as transcribed, quote, "Michael is the Lord of the guard of the change that comes in every soul that seeks the way, even as in those periods when his manifestations came in the earth," end quote. A 20th century Englishman who comprehensively documented his healing work and became known throughout the world was Harry Edwards, who wrote many books on the subject. One of these, The Evidence for Spirit Healing, presents 10,369 citations of supernormal healings covering a period of 4 years to present extensive documentation of spiritual healing facilitated by Edwards and his helpers. Integral to what he described as spirit healing, Edwards found it evidential that, quote, man possesses a spirit counterpart of himself, which is termed the spirit body. If this were not so, there would be no clairvoyance, physical phenomena, healing, the sixth sense, inspiration, premonition, etc. End quote. He also wrote, quote, "When we see, we do not see with the eye. This is only the transmitting organ to the brain, and which interprets the experience received upon our state of consciousness. Neither do we hear with the ear, which again is the transmitting organ via the brain to the consciousness. As a result of the light reactions and sound waves received by the eye and ear, the brain enables that recording part of us, our consciousness, to receive and retain a picture of the sight or sound. When a clairvoyant sees, his consciousness receives a picture just as clear and precise as with physical vision, although it has not been received by the physical eye, since the subject is invisible to normal sight. Similarly, when a clairaudient hears, his consciousness presents him with an experience identical to his actually hearing physical sound." End quote. In the 1968 book, Harry Edwards' 30 Years a Spiritual Healer, Edwards commented about healers, quote, "They are but the attuned channels of spirit used as transmitters of particularized healing forces to effect beneficial changes in given ill conditions. Spiritual healing is not the prerogative of any man or any church, and neither is it a cure-all, for even as there are laws which govern the universe itself, so spiritual healing is governed by certain laws." End quote. Perhaps among the most compelling autobiographies of paranormal people are those by men and women who achieved renown as psychics and mediums. Individually and collectively, these authors offer a profound message for humanity. Eileen Garrett was a medium who would go into a trance, and other personalities would speak through her without her having any memory of what they said. In her first memoir, published in 1939, My Life as in Search for the Meaning of Mediumship, she observed, quote, "All my supernormal experiences convinced me that the past, present, and future are but aspects of one continuous process in the universe. In such an evolution, birth and death fall into place as necessary phases of an eternally changing cycle which strives towards the perfection of man's soul. One life is for a human being a single fragment of his total experience, and through such existence man is bound by memory and sensation to all living forms which have been and shall be. For me, therefore, the state of death is no more than a breathing spell in which the soul, which has passed out of this life, may take time to extract the essence of that experience before it enters into another phase of being." End quote. A direct voice medium whose work resulted with evidentiary audio recordings of his remarkable sittings was Leslie Flint. Flint said, quote, "The voices of the dead speak directly to their friends or relatives, and are located in space a little above my head and slightly to one side of me." End quote. Many direct voice recordings made in the presence of Flint may currently be heard without charge at the website www.leslieflint.com. An impressive photo at the website is captioned, "An infrared photo of Leslie Flint showing ectoplasm emanating from his neck, which is used to build the voice box." This amazing ectoplasmic larynx allowed people from the ascended realm of existence to communicate with us, and in this case, have their discourses preserved by tape recorder. While most of the recordings are from people who never achieved great recognition during their earth lives, there are some voices identified as belonging to once famous men and women whose communication from the other side may be heard at this website, including Frederick Chopin, Marie Curie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Herbert Hoover, Thomas Jefferson, and Rudolph Valentino. We are able to consider many incidents involving the Valentino sittings due to the 1965 book The Voice of Valentino, through Leslie Flint by Lynn Russell. Russell's information is corroborated by Flint's 1971 autobiography, Voices in the Dark, My Life as a Medium. These thoughts about Leslie Flint and other paranormal people, as I refer to them, will give you some indication of the scope of my new book, Holly Weird. To conclude this brief lecture, I'll offer one more comment about superconsciousness. The truth can be stated in simple or complex ways and isn't altogether comprehensible. Now the word oneness, for me, evokes our condition of experiencing God through encountering on a daily basis a multitudinous assortment of aspects in all living things around us. Where our lessons of atonement or achieving at one-ment with God are concerned, if one is committed to learning and to showing love to God, one's actions will manifest this awareness in the interaction with all life forms. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Testament.org website, I invite you to read about my research and experiences. Most of what is chronicled happened during the first few years following my revelatory experience that started in Oklahoma. My email address is markrussellbell@earthlink.net.